But I'll start by saying I'm feeling grateful today. I'm really feeling grateful for a particular place and people that I have now loved for a quarter of a century. You, the people of Cumberland First Baptist Church. When I think of you, my church family, a range of words and phrases come to mind. Home, safe, genuine, caring, affectionate, principled, open-spirited, fun-loving, more descriptors beyond what I could count. Altogether, though, I've been thinking these comprise the essence of life lived in what I'll call intentional community, which Christian faith and so many expressions of faith, other kinds as well, get so right, and which for us is best described by the biblical word we've been talking about this morning, koinonia. Koinonia, an intimate sharing in common with others. And all right, when I was writing that phrase, I looked down and I saw that I had substituted one of the with the H for another T, and so I got help me here. I got sharing in common with otters. And then I started thinking about how remarkably funny that was, because my daughter Rachel, our eldest daughter, worked as a zookeeper for several years at the Indianapolis Zoo in forests, and now and then we got to do behind the scenes with her. And one time I did a behind the scene with her just on a day when I actually had some time on my hands. And we went behind the scenes into the place where the otters are when the otters aren't out with the people. And she fed them. And otters are insane. They are the craziest critters. I mean, they just went utterly wild. They went out of control, right to the fence. They just wanted her. They wanted her food is what they wanted. And curiously, the otters are in a paddock with the gibbons. And the gibbons are Rachel's favorite. She really bonded with the gibbons. So we're outside walking by the gibbon paddock, and you can see the otters, and they're up on this ledge in that particular paddock. And they see her because they know her, because she's a meal ticket. And she's got on the outfit, she's got her frizzy, kind of blondish hair. And suddenly they go wild and crazy. And there are other people standing around like in front of us, and they're just looking around at the gibbons. And suddenly they see these crazy otters jumping off of this ledge, coming down right toward them. And they get all excited. Wow, these otters love us. They just think we're great, And Rachel, is just like, They're all about Rachel. They're all about Rachel. Okay, so that fits this morning because koinonia, the premise of it, is the interrelationship, the interconnectedness of all things, all others, including all otters. The stubborn fact that each thing is intimately related to every other. Now, there are a lot of depictions of this reality, one of which is on our bulletin cover this morning. I love this picture. It's a sanctuary turned hub for meals and conversation. A diverse space, take a look at it. Maybe James will even put it up, but that's okay, don't bother. A diverse space for human expression, but all under the broad roof of belonging in what you and I think of as the Jesus way. The Jesus way. This is a bold and a beautiful notion of our faith, which, in fairness, ought to be governing of all of our relationships in society generally. That we are bound to, that we are colorfully connected by nature to one another. And yet, alas, no. Truth be told, it seems, and perhaps increasingly so, not to be the case that generous-hearted, broad-spirited community wins out in this world. that we seem much more fatally tribal instead. A good friend of mine tells a tale of his time in high school, an experience thankfully foreign to mine, but surely not unique and quite likely not all that unusual. It amounted to a game that once he played with friends of his. It was a popularity game, and it went something like this. A group of around 10 of his friends, all male, would each week unfriend one of their number. Suddenly, that person would be out of the group. Next week, somebody else. Hazed, spurned, kind of Lord of the Flies light, let's call it. And so it continued. Without much awareness, one would guess, because finally, inevitably, the week came when my friend, one of the three remaining, was himself X'd out, deleted. What had seemed kind of fun and exciting somehow finally came home to roost. I tell you this story because it says something very dark and troubling about human nature. And if that seems too bleak, not realistic, you tell me, how do you account for the success, the hunger for, really? Reality TV shows like Survivor, how many years? Or The Circle, or The Hunt, or Castaways, or Capture, or 72 Hours. This is a list long, expressive of our proclivity to exclude. One of the thought leaders I have been following through these times of upheaval in America is historian Timothy Snyder. Anybody? His Substack, Thinking About, is superb. He's also a much-read author of several books, among them Road to Unfreedom, a warning about the rise of tyranny in the U.S. and globally. Snyder is particularly concerned with what he calls the pre-politics of systems of government, specifically communism, fascism, and liberal democracy. Communism and fascism have some things in common, he says. They're not that far apart. Their whole setup is us against them. A permanent enemy we face and we must defeat. For communism, this inevitably is a warfare that's class-based, the working class versus the elites. There will always be class warfare, so it goes. That's just the way things are. While for fascism, the constant enemy is the different races who aren't us. There will always be different races we need to stop from ruining our lives. That's just the way things are. We see these pre-political views in full bloom all around us, he says, and we are witnessing them rise up here within our borders as well. Tyranny is on ascendancy. Look around and worry, he says. Liberal democracy, on the other hand, Snyder says, is premised on shared truth and shared values. The rule of law, rules-based society. It is premised on the notion that true coexistence is possible. Broad-spirited community is possible. A communitarian vision of our lives, not a narrow individualistic or tribal vision, is possible, is ours to defend or to forfeit. But Snyder fears for the choice we seem to be busy making. Be afraid, he says. And yet I want to say the communitarian vision is not dead. It is far from it. And we see glimpses of it everywhere. It is also in our DNA. So this past Wednesday, I took my dad to the dentist. He's almost 100, and so I got to plan ahead. I arrived at his memory care unit with time to spare, a little bit of time anyway, to get him there on time. But when we got to the elevator outside of memory care, we hit a traffic jam. One elevator was on the fritz, and the other was overcrowded with walkers and wheelchairs, residents going up to activities, going down to the main lounge area. But in fact, no one was going anywhere. The working elevator would arrive on our floor, and it would open, filled with occupants, heading up, and then it would close. And then 2 minutes later, it would open again with the same people on it, still not having reached their floor, while the rest of us just kind of waved as the door closed again, and it kept going on like this. This happened numerous times. I have no idea what the problem was, but we were all so stuck in that comedic loop. Some of us, well, I'll say some of them, taking it in really good stride. Others a little cantankerous by temperament. In my case, really in a hurry not to be late for my dad. But we were all in this together. We were, I want to tell you, Koinonia, the intimate community of an elevator fiasco. And yes, finally the elevator opened and the people had disappeared. They just disappeared, like some kind of a magic act. And we bid farewell the ones waiting to go up, and we rode down and we got out of there. But we were community now. And then, just to make the point more vivid, finally out on the road, I pointed out to my dad as we approached the interstate just how much traffic there was out there, cars everywhere. And by now, I know there was irritation in my voice because we were going to be late. And my father, not missing a beat this last Wednesday, says to me, "Yeah, a lot of people must be going to the dentist." Koinonia. All of us out there on the road, all of us in this together. And I take this word of my father in his diminished mental condition, I take it with great seriousness. He was reaching for what he knew, for commonality. He was channeling the communitarian connection that fought and won a world war in the interest of liberal democracy, the vision of a way of life beyond tribalism. It is baked into my dad. And true to form, when I tell him, as I have been, that the fabric of our society, based upon this vision, is being torn asunder, his hair-trigger response, this man who marched across France into Germany, liberated a concentration camp and a continent, he says simply, "What can we do?" And of course, there are many vital sources for us of inspired community, and some of them come from the Scriptures. Our biblical witness. How does Christian faith in the way of Jesus, inform our own commitments to these things as 21st century citizens of this nation and of this globe? Well, back to the biblical vision of koinonia, I guess, again, a Greek word, again, that translates community, roughly. This notion of each thing related intimately to every other. This was early perceived by the ancient Hebrews. They spoke of God as the God of the people Israel. The people Israel, rarely just of individuals within Israel. They weren't interested so much in the individual, but the people. They believed in the communal consequences of individual actions. That's where they were focused. When someone sinned, the whole balance of life was tipped, it was disturbed. Everybody lost. When promises were broken with the widow or the orphan, or yes, with the foreigner, promises were broken with everybody, including with God. If laws of Israel like the Ten Commandments were violated, the consequences reverberated far beyond the individual act. Honor your father and mother, the Israelites were told, that you may live in the land which the Lord your God will give you. Not just about your mom and dad, it's about everything. To break covenant with blood relations was to break covenant with God and with your very own future. Even Hebrew dietary laws were about much more than what's on the menu. They were thoughtful attempts to express the intimate relationship between God's people and the rest of creation under their care. By the time of the early church, the concept of koinonia was everywhere. Greek philosophers from Plato to Aristotle to Pythagoras proposed common ownership, or koinos, of possessions as a logical way of structuring society. Calling to mind the scripture that Kat read from Acts chapter 2, a utopian vision in which all possessions of the early church in Jerusalem, everything was held in common. Socialism before it was a democratic option. The cynics And the Stoics, too, embraced the idea that all things should serve the common good, either the good of all together or the interests of none are served. Now, the Hebrews had no philosophical framework out of which to understand how things all affect one another and are affected by each other, but they were onto something. They were onto something big nonetheless. The Greeks, on the other hand, did have a well-thought-out philosophy to back up their practice of koinonia, but now we understand even better the philosophical good sense of biblical koinonia. Now we understand from things like relativity theory, quantum mechanics, just how true their intuitions were. Each thing does affect the other. Every choice, every action, every person, not merely upon each other. We're working in each other. If you find this confusing or doubtful, just think about the last time somebody said something really, really kind to you. And hopefully that wasn't too long ago, because you deserve it. But think about that time, something really that touched you deeply. And think about something hateful that greatly wounded you. And then recall how you carried around that good feeling of satisfaction like it was like a shot of adrenaline in your bloodstream. Or that feeling of injury that you carried around with you like a tumor in your own flesh. Such spoken words do literally become a part of us. This is a fact of the universe. It's the fact of universal koinonia at work in each of us for better or worse. Indeed, I don't even think it's too bold to call koinonia the hidden structure of all reality, that the universe itself is a vast koinonia of interrelation in which each thing touches every other, as we seem to learn more each day from science, from studies of our environment, from the growing impacts of climate change, or of viruses like corona, or measles, or bird flu. Why then is so much working against the biblical spirit of koinonia? Why is communitarian a dirty word? Why is it that I would wager that if today Jesus gathered just, a large, diverse group of outsiders, the kind that followed him around everywhere, and then he said to them the things that he once proclaimed in the Sermon on the Mount, why do I think that the odds are growing that he and they would be rounded up and taken somewhere? Why do some want to limit the spirit of koinonia? Koinonia only north of the southern border. Koinonia only south of the northern border. Koinonia only LGP inclusive, but not TQ and plus. And where does this leave us Christians? We Christians have not only a philosophy of koinonia, we've got a theology of koinonia. As Christians, we believe that God is the author of this mysterious truth of the universe's interrelationship. And for us, you and me, this is nowhere truer than here, right here in the church. The church is called to be a hub of active wonder concerning God's koinonia, a place where it comes to life, where it comes clearly into focus. Here, love of God and love of neighbor are truly intimately connected. You and I and God are truly intimately connected. In Ephesians 4, Paul puts it this way: we're members of one another. But perhaps the most beautiful way of describing koinonia is that unique community that is the church, as described in the story of Paul's mission in the book of Galatians, his mission to the Gentiles. The great question of the early church was what to do with the Gentiles. What to do with the Gentile Christians. What to do with us. That was the great question. What to do with us, non-Jews. And This question comes in the heat of Paul's dispute with the leaders of the mother church at Jerusalem over whether Gentiles could be good Christians without first being good Jews. Specifically, whether male Gentile Christians needed to be circumcised. And this was the bloody, literally hot-button issue of the moment. But in the end, the leaders of the Jerusalem church made their peace with Paul by offering to him the right hand of Christian fellowship. What is the right hand? It is literally the right hand of koinonia, of course, whereby, like a relational accord sealed with a handshake, each side acknowledged the validity and grace of the other's mission. James, Peter, and John to the Jews, Paul and Barnabas to the Gentiles, two missions grounded in one deeper reality, one deeper koinonia of God. And this is extremely important as well. Perhaps the single most critical breakthrough of church history, right here. A true coming together, while sadly, just to name the obvious, the church has mostly been splitting apart ever since for the last 2,000 years. And make your list of denominational groups and communions. How many kinds of Baptists are there? Oh my goodness. Don't get me started. We do division real well. We don't understand multiplication too well. This foundation is so rich, so compelling, that a remarkable variety of cultural differences, views, and convictions can coexist within the faith. As Paul states it in 1 Corinthians 12, there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. How different from the pre-political assumptions of division. So that here is why, in case you need an excuse, here is why to still be Christian. To still be Christian, right here. Meanwhile, on Koinonia, as a Christian and in America, I have questions. Like, why aren't we apoplectic about the deportation without charge of hundreds of Venezuelans to a notorious supermax prison in El Salvador, including the deportation of a soccer player with every right to be here who had no due process, no access to the rule of law, which our laws promise him. And he is not the only one. We are not safe. We imagine that we are. If he can be taken, anyone can be taken. I began this morning with a word to each of you about how I feel about this place, about the wonder and the grace of home for me. This is our anchor, our refuge in times of storm. But we have this. We've got this. In order that we can face the storm for ourselves and face it for other people. We claim koinonia here so we can fight for it there, everywhere. This is how Jesus lived, and all who have followed him faithfully. This is the way, the only way I know of, that we embody fully the koinonia of God, the holy community that makes the world go round and helps it go right. Amen.